Thank you very much, Isabel. It falls to me to introduce our next speaker, but a few brief announcements to underscore what Jotaro said a little while ago on a couple of things. One is, when I began to travel, I learned that color symbolism is not the same the world around, and in some places I learned that, although I learned that green means go and red means stop, usually when I was growing up. Green in some places means marital infidelity, and red means wealth and great luxury. So I thought I might want to clarify that green means talk here, amber means answer questions, and red means sit down. John, I'm not giving this message to you necessarily. The other thing is to underscore what Jotaro said a little while ago. Please go to Piazza Omi, third floor, main hall today, and visit with our exhibitors. They've gone to great expense to come here and have wonderful things to show you. And there's the stamp rally that Jotaro mentioned also, that if you collect 5 signatures from those vendors, you get the chance to win a Biwa pearl and other wonderful things. And if you didn't know, Biwa pearls are amongst the most beautiful and intricate on the entire planet. So please go over there and visit with our exhibitors. Let's see. Oops, I'm operating the wrong one. Which one? Yeah. We've got 30 mice up here. What a pleasure to present the speaker for the awardee for the Ramon Margalef Award for Excellence in Education. I will say that I also had the pleasure of presenting the same awardee, the Hutchinson Award, some years ago. The Margalef Award is a relatively new award that we have to recognize excellence in teaching and mentoring in the fields of limnology and oceanography. And for those of you who would like to, who are interested in nominating someone, nominations are accepted any time during the year by the chair of the awards committee. John Smol is recognized this year with ASLO's Margalef Excellence in Education Award. And John was nominated by Brian Cumming. And we received letters from Darlene Lim, Roland Hall, and Bronwyn Keithley, extraordinary letters attesting to John's spectacular role in education. But before I get to that, I promised him I would show at least one embarrassing photograph. And this is John in '77. Well, he's on the left in the foreground. The roasting lamb is on the right. In the background, well, you can tell that this was back long enough ago that beer bottles in Canada had the proper shape. And a few famous scientists in the background. Out of focus, but many things were out of focus in the 70s also. So John has acute focus, in fact, on both his science and education. And the citation on the Ramon Margalef Award this year, the citation is as follows. I'll just read through this. To my students, past and present, these are the words that John Smol used in the opening dedication of his highly acclaimed textbook, Pollution of Lakes and Rivers, now in its 2nd edition, and summarized John's motivation for his legendary work ethic and dedication to excellence in teaching. His work ethic was legendary even as an undergraduate student at Lake Memphremagog so many years ago. His prowess in scientific research has been well recognized. He's published over 440 journal papers and chapters and 19 books. He's won so many awards around the world, including the Hertzberg Gold Medal as Canada's top scientist or engineer, and is a previous winner, as I mentioned, of the Hutchinson Award of ASLO. John's success with over 60 graduate students and 20 postdoctoral fellows is legendary, with his graduates filling faculty and research positions in the best universities and research facilities, again, around the world. John is an outstanding scientist with an equally remarkable record of teaching, student mentorship, and communication. And it's my great pleasure to be able to hand him this year's Ramon Margalef Award and turn him over to you for a talk. There it is.
Where did you find that? Thank you. The first step of effective teaching is to have the technology in place, so we're... Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, John. I'd love to know where you got that picture. You took it yourself. That was probably in the late 1970s when I was an undergraduate at Mentor Magog. So it's wonderful to be here. And of course, first I would like to thank all of you for coming, and also, of course, the ASLO for my giving me this award, and my nominator Brian Cumming and the letter writers. But also to all my students and postdoctoral fellows and other colleagues who have made my job so interesting and so much fun. Although teaching and mentoring is something that we do most of the year as academics or as researchers, it's become clear to me that talking about teaching and mentorship is not something we normally do. And putting together this talk was a little bit of a challenge. It's something that we do. It's something that we probably don't write notes about. It's something that we typically don't have PowerPoints for. But what I tried to do in the 20 minutes or so that I have is to put together what I would say about 12 suggestions that I could think of that I believe are important for conveying to other mentors, to other teachers, and other students. I'm fully aware that this auditorium is full of teachers, full of mentors, and it's also full of some students. Those students already are in many ways mentors and teachers, and they will probably be more so as they move on in their careers. So I'd like to reflect on some of the lessons I've learned by trying to blend research and teaching and mentorship in my career. Before I begin, though, I would like to pay homage to Professor Margalef, which is an outstanding person to have this award named after. I believe it's very aptly named by Professor Margalef, who I met a few times before he died. He was one who was able to blend an outstanding research career and also an outstanding teaching career and mentorship career and communication career. And I think he's been a very good role model for many people. I think we as professors or other types of researchers and mentors, when we deal with students, we enter a sacred trust of some type. Students have decided to invest a significant amount of their time and often a significant financial resources as their part of this agreement. That's the sacred trust they made with us. We as professors have a sacred trust to do our job, our part of the bargain. And our part of our bargain should be that we have an unconditional commitment to give them the absolute best we can during that time that they're going to be in our classrooms, our laboratories, and our fieldwork settings. And in my university and elsewhere, I think we always hear about the supposed conflict between teaching and research as if they were separate, almost like it's this teeter-totter or the seesaw going back and forth, and that you can do one or the other. And I've always challenged this. My view is that certainly both teaching and research take time to do well, but for me the two have merged very closely together. If we think of research as knowledge creation, I think teaching as knowledge communication, obviously it's sort of silly to do one without the other. Similarly, research informs teaching, but in many ways, teaching also informs research. We're all learners. I think most students do not fully recognize their strengths and potentials, and I think that one of the main jobs of a thesis supervisor or mentor is to help identify and tap the strengths of students and so that they can reach the maximum they can. I think our job is to always keep asking probing questions, and we do that with our research, and providing challenges until the full potential of each student can be met. I think my main job then is to challenge complacency. It's to ensure that each student can go to the best level they can, not necessarily as far as they think they can go, but as far as they can go. And so to do this, I've just tried to put down 12 of my major suggestions that I could think of, and I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly here, I think. But my suggestions would start by enthusiasm is an important catalyst. The excitement of discovery can be used to build on this enthusiasm. This is true of all aspects of research and teaching, and I think William Butler Yeats probably said it best when education is not the filling of a pail, but it's the lighting of the fire. We can go a long way if we can keep the enthusiasm high in our classrooms and our laboratories. I think second is we should never underestimate the importance of what we are doing. I think cynicism can be a real detriment to our overall goals. I see a large part of my job is to channel ambition into this whole creative process we call science, and at the same time try and maintain a strong moral compass in what we do. Science and other forms of scholarship can and do make a big difference in the world. We should never underestimate what we're doing. Great ideas can, in fact, change the world. And realize that we do have a lot of power and influence. We're often not using it, but research is empowerment. And as Alvin Toffler wrote, knowledge is the most democratic source of power. We can make a difference, and we should keep reminding students and our colleagues that we can. And I think the cynicism that seems to be creeping in to a lot of the things we do can actually be very, very detrimental. My third point is I think the real challenge in what we do is to ask the right questions. Getting answers is actually often very easy. Big questions do get big answers, and I think a major part of my interaction with students is for them to appreciate what their data can actually tell them. I keep trying to challenge my students by saying, stop telling me what your data or your methods can't tell you. Tell me what they can. The goal is to determine what your observations can, in fact, add to the scientific community. Undoubtedly, some of the conclusions we come up with will eventually be wrong, and this is all part of the give and take of science. But as long as our conclusions were based on sound data, this has all contributed to the process. I guess there really is no dishonor in being knocked down. There's only dishonor in not getting up again. Fourth, and this is something I've been getting more and more worried about, I think we have to show by example it is more important to be right than to be interesting. I think some people, and perhaps some fields of our science and others, feel it is more important to project an interesting persona, but being wrong. Science and scholarship is about getting answers, correct and defendable answers. And here, of course, well-placed confidence is important, but not blind confidence. And if we're going to continue on, I think we have to show that being right is, in fact, what it's all about. There isn't certainly no shame in framing bold hypotheses. In fact, I think that's exactly what we should be doing. There is, however, shame in not using the available data to form these hypotheses. I think we can say dare to challenge, dare to be wrong, but we have to again keep showing by example that our ideas have to be constrained by reality. My fifth piece of advice to students would be sometimes it's good to be outside your comfort zone. And I think this is where ASLO conferences are ideal, or other types of society conferences. I rarely go to talks that actually are, in my specific area of research, as the talks we just heard today, for example. It's often a very good way to learn about other ideas, to know this cross-fertilization and so forth. Often this is where you get new ideas, new technologies, and new approaches, and new colleagues in many ways. And I think maybe T.S. Eliot said it best when only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far they can go. My sixth piece of advice is always be prepared for surprises. And basically, our expectations are sometimes betrayed by our observations. Or another way of putting that to my students is don't get too emotionally attached to some of your hypotheses and ideas. They may cloud your judgment. And I think we're all guilty of this to a certain degree, but it is something I think we have to keep watching, and it's something that a mentor or teacher should try and do as much as possible. My seventh is learn to appreciate the positive aspects of criticism. I edit an international journal now, and I edited one previously for 20 years, so I think I've learned a lot about criticism. Being an editor is one of the most peculiar jobs, I think, on the planet. I always said that if after a paper goes through a review process, and if the reviewers and the authors both think I'm an idiot, but for completely different reasons, I've probably done my job as an editor. Criticisms and challenges are what makes our science move forward. And of course, this can have always negative implications to, people like many of us who don't like are uncomfortable, contentious situations. But part of the process with students is to learn that this is to actually appreciate the positive sides of criticism. And perhaps someone John Downing and I are very familiar with from McGill, I'm sure many of you are. I think Rob Peters probably said it best in one of his books. We hone our theories in research until they are as keen and sharp as they may be. The whetstone against which we sharpen our tools is criticism. Science is, in fact, self-correcting. Science does work by falsifications and challenges. But by the same token, there are definitely lessons to be learned from being wrong, and we as teachers and mentors should share these lessons. By the same token, just as there are positive aspects to criticism, I think there are positive ways to criticize. And perhaps maybe stated more plainly, we should show by example that anonymity is no excuse to be a jerk. And something that is, I think, is important that we can show to our students that even though you may not be signing a review, there are different ways we can actually do a review, even if we disagree with the conclusions. My 8th piece of advice to students is, if nature or circumstances throws you a slow-moving softball, belt it out of the park. You may not get a second chance. And I hear a lot about this, like such and such a scientist is so lucky, always getting the ideas, always getting those papers out there. I think the amount of luck out there is about equal. I think what the difference is that people do take the initiative when they have a good idea or they have a good paper and they actually run with it. And I think we have to show that to students. Of course, students often are often a little, well, it depends on the students, it's hard to generalize, but often a little more cautious. They're a little scared to go out with their ideas. We have to keep emphasizing that there's no such thing as a final study, but that is no excuse for not publishing if, and that's of course the big if you have solid data and can make reasonable conclusions. And as I said, of course, some of that may turn out being wrong in the long run. But I think what really I'm saying here is potential has a shelf life. And I think once you have these ideas, you really have to move with them in an orderly manner, but just not hang them around. And the 9th piece of advice I give to students is communication of our research should not end in the classroom, the laboratory, or the campus boundaries. And I think this is where we can show by example that research is critically important to society, and that researchers can influence the political and other decisions. However, due to our generally very poor communication strategies, we don't actually do a very good job of that as of yet. But I think we have to do a much better job of moving past our boundaries of our research institute or our classrooms. And when we are communicating, my 10th piece of advice is to appreciate that we must choose our words carefully. And I think maybe Brian Moss was talking a bit about this with jargon and so on and so forth in his talk. But we really do have to start choosing our words carefully. We may even take some examples from lobby groups and others' use of words. I was recently just doing on the web search, and you can go for the Advancement of Sound Science Coalition. That sounds like something we all might want to join. I found out they fight tobacco regulation. Here's one of the ones from Canada, Friends of Science Society. I saw that in Canada. I was pulling out my Visa card. I said, I want to join them, the Friends of Science. I'm a friend of science. And the CO2 greenhouse, the biggest hoax of the 20th century. This is what we're up against. What are the types of words we use as academics? Well, some of the words we use as academics include things like curiosity-based research. Now, don't get me wrong. I am one of the biggest proponents of fundamental and basic research, and anyone who knows my work with NSERC in Ottawa and other countries as well, how important fundamental research is. But I think this phrase alone has probably cost us billions of dollars in research funding. I don't know what you think. I think when the general public hears about curiosity-based research, it's not the right connotation. We should really choose, I think, our words much more carefully, and things like call it basic research or fundamental research. But these words, I think, are very important. And my 11th piece of advice is sometimes you're going to have to throw stones at giants. Scholarship and research is about challenges, and sometimes it's challenging senior people, and sometimes it's challenging politicians and long-standing ideas. However, without courageous people, nothing will ever change. And I think, again, we can show some of this by example. And my final piece of advice to students, always remember, research and teaching are fun. I try to laugh out loud with my students at least once a day, but actually I think mostly they're laughing at me. But thank you very much for this wonderful award.
Are there any questions or comments for John?
Lunchtime.
Here comes one.
I think your point about curiosity-based research or fundamental research is so important, but I don't think we found the term yet. And it has tremendous impact on how we get our message across, and I think we as a community have got to get our heads together and come up with a term that is going to stick, because fundamental research describes what we do. It provides the foundations for so many things in society, but that still doesn't get the message across, and we've got to figure this one out pretty quickly, I think.
I agree with you totally. As a fellow Canadian there, we have a government now who is somewhat having the fight goes on. We have a government who seems to have very different views than we may have on what is important research and what is important science and what is important environmental research. And I think this is absolutely critical. We have done a very poor job of communicating the absolute value of the basic and fundamental research. If it doesn't make a profit, and we're seeing this even in universities, it's this passion for patents, basically, and seeing that this is really where we should be going, and, right to the user sector and so on and so forth. Well, anyone who actually does serious research, like the people in this room, know that applied research is sort of the top of a pyramid based on this big, solid foundation of pure, fundamental, basic research. That message is difficult to get across. It's difficult to get across, I think, for a variety of reasons, one of which is time frames. Of course, this is true of environmental issues even. We're dealing always on different time frames. Basic and fundamental research is on long time frames, stuff that's going to be useful in the long term. If we want to do the analogy, this is like the environment. A lot of the environmental issues we have are on time frames of decades or even longer. Politicians at best seem to think of 4-year intervals at best. Industry's even worse. They work on quarters, 90-day intervals. And we are on we're speaking different kinds of language. And I think the onus is on us as scientists and teachers and mentors to make that message far more clearly, the absolute urgency of continuing to fund at an acceptable level that pure and applied research. And yes, it's important to do that applied research, the stuff with the patents, but that base of that pyramid is what the whole foundation of our scientific process is on. And I think the onus is on all of us to make a better case for that.
Are there further questions or comments? Seeing none and noticing that everyone looks hungry, thanks, John. It was a wonderful and inspiring talk.
Thank you very much.